She cried all night over bills she couldn't pay, then discovered who had been paying them for 3 years. The kitchen light buzzed quietly above Sandra Mitchell's head as she spread the papers across the table, for what felt like the 100th time that month. Medical bills, explanation of benefits, past due notices, collection warnings printed in red ink that seemed almost angry at her, as if her poverty were a personal offense. She pressed her fingers against her temples and tried to breathe slowly. 3 years ago, her doctor had found a mass in her left lung during a routine checkup. She'd almost skipped because she couldn't afford the copay. What followed was a surgery, 6 rounds of chemotherapy, radiation treatment, and a financial catastrophe that nearly swallowed her whole. She had insurance, barely, through a part-time administrative job at a logistics company. But the copays, the out-of-network specialist charges, the prescription costs, the follow-up scans every 3 months, they added up faster than water fills a sinking boat. At one point, the total outstanding balance across 4 different providers had climbed past $47,000, and yet somehow every month the balance went down, not because of her payments. She could barely make rent on the small, 2-bedroom apartment she shared with no one since Emma had left for college. Not because of any settlement or insurance appeal she'd won, but slowly, steadily, almost invisibly, the number shrank. She had assumed in her exhaustion that it was billing adjustments, charity care write-offs, some kind of clerical miracle she didn't fully understand, and was too tired to question. When you are fighting cancer with one hand and poverty with the other, you don't look gift horses in the mouth, you just keep moving. So she kept moving. She worked her part-time job. She picked up weekend shifts at a florist shop 3 blocks from her apartment. She ate rice and beans more nights than she'd ever admit to anyone. She went to her treatments, came home pale and nauseated, slept for 12 hours, and got up and did it again. And she cried in this kitchen, alone in the dark, more times than she could count. Tonight she was crying again, but for an entirely different reason. Tomorrow was her daughter's wedding. Emma Mitchell was 26 years old and getting married to Daniel Reeves on a warm Saturday afternoon in June at a small garden venue just outside Columbus, Ohio. It was exactly the kind of wedding Emma had always described wanting, unpretentious, intimate, surrounded by flowers and people who genuinely loved her. Sandra had worked double shifts for 8 months to help contribute to the wedding costs. She'd paid for the floral arrangements and the rehearsal dinner, and she'd bought Emma's wedding shoes as a surprise gift the week before. She wanted her daughter to feel fully loved, fully celebrated. Emma deserved that. Emma had earned that. What Sandra had not expected was the phone call she received at 9:47 on Friday night. She was sitting at the kitchen table, reviewing the seating chart one more time, when her phone buzzed. Unknown number, Columbus area code. She almost didn't answer. Ms. Mitchell? A professional, unhurried female voice. This is patient billing at Riverside Medical. I'm calling regarding account number 77432. We received your final payment today, and I wanted to confirm your balance is now cleared to 0. Would you like us to send a paid-in-full letter to your address on file? Sandra set down the seating chart. I'm sorry, she said carefully. Can you repeat that? Your account balance, ma'am. It's been paid in full as of today. We just need to confirm the mailing address for your documentation. Sandra's hand tightened around the phone. She had not made a payment to Riverside Medical in 6 weeks. She hadn't had the money. She'd been mentally preparing herself to call them after the wedding and set up a new payment arrangement. Who made the payment? She asked. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. A brief pause. The payments on this account have been processed through a third-party arrangement. I'm not able to disclose the name without authorization, but the account is fully satisfied. Another pause, gentler this time. Ma'am, is everything all right? Sandra realized she was gripping the edge of the table. Yes, she said. I'm fine, thank you. She hung up and sat completely still for a long moment. Then she pulled up her phone and found the billing portal for Columbus General, the second hospital where she'd had her surgery. She logged in with shaking fingers. Balance 0.0 paid in full. She checked the third account, the oncology group that had managed Her chemotherapy. Balance 0-0. Her hands were trembling now. She sat in the buzzing light of her kitchen, surrounded by wedding seating charts and empty coffee cups, and stared at the wall. Someone had been paying her medical bills for 3 years, and she had never known. The wedding ceremony was set for 2 o'clock. By noon, Emma was already in her dress, ivory lace, simple and breathtaking, laughing with her 3 bridesmaids. In the back suite of the venue, Sandra stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her daughter. This woman she had raised largely on her own after the divorce, and felt a love so enormous and aching that it almost knocked the air from her lungs. She had come so close to not making it to this day. There had been a night during her second round of chemotherapy when she had genuinely wondered if she would see Emma get married. She hadn't told Emma that. She hadn't told anyone. But she had lain in her bed at 3 a.m. with tears running silently into her pillow, bargaining with God for just a little more time. She was here. She had made it. And someone she couldn't yet name, had quietly, anonymously, made sure that the financial devastation of her illness hadn't finished what the cancer couldn't. Across the sun-washed garden, she spotted him, Marcus. Her ex-husband stood near the white gazebo at the far end of the venue, adjusting his tie in the reflection of a decorative mirror that had been set up near the entrance. He was 51 now, with more gray at his temples than she remembered. But he carried himself the same way he always had. Unhurried, grounded, quietly steady. They had divorced 11 years ago when Emma was 15. It hadn't been a war. There had been no screaming, no lawyers fighting over assets, no ugliness that scarred their daughter. It had simply been 2 people who had grown into different shapes and finally acknowledged, with sadness and without cruelty, that they no longer fit together. Sandra had asked for space. Marcus had given it to her, and completely without bitterness. They had co-parented Emma with a respect that many of their friends had found remarkable. Holidays were navigated thoughtfully. Parent-teacher conferences were attended together. When Emma graduated high school and then college, they had sat side by side and cheered without awkwardness. But they were not close. They were not friends. They were 2 people who shared a daughter and maintained a careful, cordial distance. Sandra had never known much about Marcus's private life. She knew he'd built a successful construction management company in the years after the divorce. She knew he hadn't remarried. She knew Emma adored him unconditionally, called him every Sunday evening, drove to his house in Dayton for holidays. She had never asked for more details than that. She crossed the garden slowly. Marcus. He turned from the mirror and smiled, easy and genuine. Sandra, you look beautiful. Thank you. She hesitated, standing a few feet away from him, all 11 years of careful distance suspended in the June air between them. Can I talk to you for a minute? Before everything starts? Of course. He read her face and his expression grew slightly more attentive. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. She exhaled. I got a call last night. From the hospital's billing department. She watched his face closely. They told me my account had been paid in full. And then I checked my other accounts. She paused. Marcus, every single medical bill I had from the last 3 years, and all of them, they're all paid. Everyone. He was quiet. Not the quiet of someone caught off guard. The quiet of someone who had been waiting for a long time. For a conversation they knew was eventually coming. Was it you? She asked. He looked away from her briefly, toward the garden, toward the guests beginning to filter into the white folding chairs near the gazebo. Then he looked back. Emma called me, he said, the week after your diagnosis. She was terrified. She didn't ask me to do anything, she just needed to say it out loud to someone. I think she was crying, he paused. I've never heard Emma cry like that. Sandra pressed her lips together. I called the hospital the next morning, Marcus continued. I asked if I could set up anonymous third-party payments on your accounts. They said I could. He said it simply, without drama. So I did. Sandra stared at him. I set up arrangements with all 4 providers over the next 2 weeks, he said. I asked them not to disclose the source. I knew if you found out you'd fight me on it. A faint knowing look crossed his face. And you were too exhausted to fight another battle. Her throat had tightened to almost nothing. "Marcus," she managed. "How much?" "It doesn't matter. Tell me." He was quiet for a moment. The band inside the venue had begun warming up. Somewhere nearby a child laughed. "A little over $43,000, he said. "Across all the accounts. Over about 34 months. The number moved through her like a slow, stunning wave. $43,000. 34 months. Anonymous. Silent, while she sat alone in her kitchen crying over bills. She thought she'd never escape. Some invisible hand had been quietly pulling her back from the edge. And that hand had been his. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. His answer was immediate and gentle. "Because you would have refused. And you needed to focus on getting better, not on arguing with me about money." She laughed, a cracked, overwhelmed sound that was equal parts gratitude and grief and disbelief. "You should have told me," she said again, though they both knew in this moment that she didn't entirely mean it. He smiled softly. "You're right, probably." His eyes were warm. "But then I wouldn't have gotten to see your face right now." She covered her mouth with her hand. Her eyes were filling. "Marcus?" "Hey." His voice was steady, grounding, the same voice that had talked her through 3 difficult moves. A miscarriage before Emma, a car accident in 2003, all the hard chapters of a shared life that no divorce decree could fully erase. "Don't cry. Your daughter is getting married in an hour, and you are not showing up to that altar with puffy eyes." She laughed again, stronger this time, and wiped carefully beneath her lashes. "You are," she said, shaking her head slowly. "Unbelievable. I've been told." The ceremony was everything Emma had ever wanted. She walked down the petal-lined aisle on her father's arm, luminous and tearful and laughing at herself for being tearful. And Sandra sat in the front row with her hands folded in her lap and held herself together through the vows with every ounce of discipline she possessed. During the reception, while Daniel and Emma shared their first dance, Sandra found Marcus at the edge of the dance floor, watching his daughter with an expression of absolute, uncomplicated joy. She stood beside him without a word. They watched Emma together, this woman they had made, raised, worried over, cheered for, and loved with every imperfect, wholehearted thing they had. "She's happy," Sandra said quietly. "Yeah," Marcus said, "she is." A comfortable silence settled between them. Not the silence of estrangement. Something older than that. Something that had survived divorce and distance, and 11 years of careful courtesy. "I'm going to pay you back," Sandra said. He didn't even hesitate. "No, you're not." "Marcus." "Sandra." He looked at her, calm, final, kind. "Let it go." She looked at him for a long moment. This man who had once been her husband, who had given her a daughter, who had stepped quietly and completely out of her daily life when she asked him to, and who had then, without fanfare, without expectation, spent 34 months making sure she survived. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded once, looked back at Emma on the dance floor. "Thank you for raising her," he said. "For getting through everything you got through so you could be here today. A beat. That's all I ever wanted. For you to make it." Sandra felt the tears come again and didn't fight them this time. Some chapters of a life close completely. Others simply transform, become something quieter, something without a name, something that doesn't show up on any legal document but persists anyway, steady and real in the background of everything. Not every love story ends at the altar. Some of the most profound ones play out in hospital billing offices and kitchen tables and quiet moments at the edge of a dance floor, witnessed by no one, documented nowhere, but felt in the deepest, most enduring places of the human heart. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes in quiet, unsung love. The world is full of people doing extraordinary things in silence. This one's for them.